When a battery, a screw-gun mule, calls gun bullocks gentlemen, he must be very badly shaken up. Who are you fellas on the ground there?" The gun bullocks rolled their cuds and answered both together. "The 7th yoke of the 1st gun of the big gun battery. We were asleep when the camels came, but when we were trampled on we got up and walked away. It is better to lie quiet in the mud than to be disturbed on good bedding. We told your friend here that there was nothing to be afraid of, but he knew so much that he thought otherwise. Wah!" They went on chewing. "That comes of being afraid," said Billy. "You get laughed at by gun bullocks. I hope you like it, young'un." The young mule's teeth snapped, and I heard him say something about not being afraid of any beefy old bullock in the world, but the bullocks only clicked their horns together and went on chewing. "Now don't be angry after you've been afraid. That's the worst kind of cowardice," said the troop horse. "Anybody can be forgiven for being scared in the night, I think, if they see things they don't understand. We've broken out of our pickets again and again, 450 of us, just because a new recruit got to telling tales of whip snakes at home in Australia, till we were scared to death of the loose ends of our head ropes." "That's all very well in camp," said Billy. "I'm not above stampeding myself for the fun of the thing, when I haven't been out for a day or two. But what do you do on active service?" "Oh, that's quite another set of new shoes," said the troop horse. "Dick Cunliffe's on my back then, and drives his knees into me, and all I have to do is watch where I'm putting my feet, and to keep my hind legs well under me, and be bridle-wise." "What's bridle-wise?" said the young mule. "By the blue gums of the back blocks," snorted the troop horse. "You mean to say that you aren't taught to be bridle-wise in your business? How can you do anything unless you can spin round at once when the rein is pressed on your neck? It means life or death to your man, and of course that's life or death to you. Get round with your hind legs under you the instant you feel the rein on your neck. If you haven't room to swing round, rear up a little and come round on your hind legs. That's being bridle-wise." "We aren't taught that way," said Billy the mule stiffly. "We're taught to obey the man at our head. Step off when he says so, and step in when he says so. I suppose it comes to the same thing. Now, with all this fine fancy business and rearing, which must be very bad for your hocks, what do you do?" "That depends," said the troop horse. "Generally I have to go in among a lot of yelling, hairy men with knives, long shiny knives, worse than the farrier's knives. And I have to take care that Dick's boot is just touching the next man's boot without crushing it. I can see Dick's lance to the right of my right eye, and I know I'm safe. I shouldn't care to be the man or horse that stood up to Dick and me when we're in a hurry." "Don't the knives hurt?" said the young mule. "Well, I got one cut across the chest once, but that wasn't Dick's fault." "A lot I should have cared whose fault it was if it hurt," said the young mule. "You must," said the troop horse. "If you don't trust your man, you may as well run away at once. That's what some of our horses do, and I don't blame them. As I was saying, it wasn't Dick's fault. The man was lying on the ground, and I stretched myself not to tread on him, and he slashed up at me. Next time I have to go over a man lying down, I shall step on him, hard." Said Billy. "It sounds very foolish. Knives are dirty things at any time. The proper thing to do is to climb up a mountain with a well-balanced saddle, hang on by all 4 feet, and your ears too, and creep and crawl and wriggle along till you come out hundreds of feet above anyone else on a ledge where there's just room enough for your hoofs. Then you stand still and keep quiet. Never ask a man to hold your head, young'un. Keep quiet while the guns are being put together, and then you watch the little poppy shells drop down into the tree-tops ever so far below." "Don't you ever trip?" said the troop horse. "They say that when a mule trips you can split a hen's ear," said Billy. "Now and again, perhaps, a badly packed saddle will upset a mule, but it's very seldom. I wish I could show you our business. It's beautiful. Why, it took me 3 years to find out what the men were driving at. The science of the thing is never to show up against the skyline, because if you do, you may get fired at. Remember that, young'un. Always keep hidden as much as possible, even if you have to go a mile out of your way. I lead the battery when it comes to that sort of climbing." "Fired at without the chance of running into the people who are firing?" said the troop horse, thinking hard. "I couldn't stand that. I should want to charge with Dick." "Oh, no, you wouldn't. You know that as soon as the guns are in position, they'll do all the charging. That's scientific and neat. But knives, pah! The baggage camel had been bobbing his head to and fro for some time past, anxious to get a word in edgeways. Then I heard him say, as he cleared his throat nervously, I have fought a little, but not in that climbing way or that running way. No, now you mention it, said Billy. You don't look as though you were made for climbing or running, much. Well, how was it, old hay bales? The proper way, said the camel. We all sat down. Oh, my crupper and breastplate, said the troop horse under his breath. Sat down? We sat down, 100 of us, the camel went on, in a big square, and the men piled our packs and saddles outside the square, and they fired over our backs, the men did, on all sides of the square. What sort of men? Any men that came along? Said the troop horse. They teach us in riding school to lie down and let our masters fire across us, but Dick Cunliffe is the only man I'd trust to do that. It tickles my girths, and besides, I can't see with my head on the ground. What does it matter who fires across you? Said the camel. There are plenty of men and plenty of other camels close by, and a great many clouds of smoke. I'm not frightened then. I sit still and wait. And yet, said Billy, you dream bad dreams and upset the camp at night. Well, well, before I'd lie down, not to speak of sitting down, and let a man fire across me, my heels and his head would have something to say to each other. Did you ever hear anything so awful as that? There was a long silence, and then one of the gun bullocks lifted up his big head and said, This is very foolish indeed. There is only one way of fighting. Oh, go on, said Billy. Please don't mind me. I suppose you fellows fight standing on your tails. Only one way, said the two together. They must have been twins. This is that way. To put all 20 yoke of us to the big gun as soon as Two Tails trumpets. Two Tails is a camp slang for the elephant. What does Two Tails trumpet for? Said the young mule. To show that he is not going any nearer to the smoke on the other side. Two Tails is a great coward. Then we tug the big gun all together. Hey-ya, hurrah, hee-ya, hurrah. We do not climb like cats nor run like calves. We go across the level plain, 20 yoke of us, till we are unyoked again, and we graze while the big guns talk across the plain to some town with mud walls, and pieces of the wall fall out, and the dust goes up as though many cattle were coming home. Oh, and you choose that time for grazing, do you? Said the young mule. That time, or any other. Eating is always good. We eat till we are yoked up again, and tug the back gun to where Two Tails is waiting for it. Sometimes there are big guns in the city that speak back, and some of us are killed, and then there is all the more grazing for those that are left. This is fate, nothing but fate. None the less, Two Tails is a great coward. That is the proper way to fight. We are brothers from Hapur. Our father was a sacred bull of Shiva. We have spoken. Well, I've certainly learned something tonight, said the troop horse. Do you gentlemen of the screw gun battery feel inclined to eat when you're being fired at with big guns, and Two Tails is behind you? About as much as we feel inclined to sit down and let men sprawl all over us, or run into people with knives. I never heard such stuff. A mountain ledge, a well-balanced load, a driver you can trust to let you pick your own way, and I'm your mule. But the other things, no, said Billy, with a stamp of his foot. Of course, said the troop horse, everyone is not made in the same way, and I can quite see that your family, on your father's side, would fail to understand a great many things. Never you mind my family on my father's side, said Billy angrily, for every mule hates to be reminded that his father was a donkey. My father was a southern gentleman, and he could pull down and bite and kick into rags every horse he came across. Remember that, you big brown Brumby. Brumby means wild horse without any breeding. Imagine the feelings of Sunol if a car horse called her a skate, and you can imagine how the Australian horse felt. I saw the white of his eye glitter in the dark. See here, you son of an imported Malaga jackass, he said between his teeth. I'd have you know that I'm related on my mother's side to Carbine, winner of the Melbourne Cup. And where I come from, we aren't accustomed to being ridden over roughshod by any parrot-mouthed, pig-headed mule in a popgun pea-shooter battery. Are you ready? On your hind legs, squealed Billy. They both reared up, facing each other, and I was expecting a furious fight, when a gurgly, rumbly voice called out of the darkness to the right, "Children, what are you fighting about there? Be quiet." Both beasts dropped down with a snort of disgust, for neither horse nor mule can bear to listen to an elephant's voice. "It's Two Tails," said the troop horse. "I can't stand him. A tail at each end isn't fair." "My feelings exactly," said Billy, crowding into the troop horse for company. "We're very alike in some things." "I suppose we've inherited them from our mothers," said the troop horse. "It's not worth quarrelling about. Hi, Two Tails, are you tied up?" "Yes," said Two Tails, with a laugh all up his trunk. "I'm picketed for the night. I've heard what you fellows have been saying, but don't be afraid. I'm not coming over." The bullocks and the camel said, half aloud, "Afraid of Two Tails? What nonsense." And the bullocks went on, "We are sorry that you heard, but it is true. Two Tails, why are you afraid of the guns when they fire?" "Well," said Two Tails, rubbing one hind leg against the other, exactly like a little boy saying a piece, "I don't quite know whether you'd understand." "We don't, but we have to pull the guns," said the bullocks. "I know it, and I know you are a good deal braver than you think you are. But it's different with me. My battery captain called me a pachydermatous anachronism the other day." "That's another way of fighting, I suppose?" said Billy, who was recovering his spirits. "You don't know what that means, of course, but I do. It means betwixt and between, and that is just where I am. I can see inside my head what will happen when a shell bursts, and you bullocks can't." "I can," said the troop horse, "at least a little bit. I try not to think about it." "I can see more than you, and I do think about it. I know there's a great deal of me to take care of, and I know that nobody knows how to cure me when I'm sick. All they can do is to stop my driver's pay till I get well, and I can't trust my driver." "Ah," said the troop horse, "that explains it. I can trust Dick." "You could put a whole regiment of Dicks on my back without making me feel any better. I know just enough to be uncomfortable, and not enough to go on in spite of it." "We do not understand," said the bullocks. "I know you don't. I'm not talking to you. You don't know what blood is." "We do," said the bullocks. "It is red stuff that soaks into the ground and smells." The troop horse gave a kick and a bound and a snort. "Don't talk of it," he said. "I can smell it now just thinking of it. It makes me want to run when I haven't Dick on my back." "But it is not here," said the camel and the bullocks. "Why are you so stupid?" "It's vile stuff," said Billy. "I don't want to run, but I don't want to talk about it." "There you are," said Two Tails, waving his tail to explain. "Surely. Yes, we have been here all night," said the bullocks. Two Tails stamped his foot till the iron ring on it jingled. "Oh, I'm not talking to you. You can't see inside your heads." "No, we see out of our 4 eyes," said the bullocks. "We see straight in front of us." "If I could do that and nothing else, you wouldn't be needed to pull the big guns at all. If I was like my captain, he can see things inside his head before firing begins, and he shakes all over, but he knows too much to run away. If I was like him, I could pull the guns. But if I were as wise as all that, I should never be here. I should be a king in the forest, as I used to be, sleeping half the day and bathing when I liked. I haven't had a good bath for a month." "That's all very fine," said Billy, "but giving a thing a long name doesn't make it any better." "Hush," said the troop horse. "I think I understand what Two Tails means." "You'll understand better in a minute," said Two Tails angrily. "Now, just you explain to me why you don't like this." He began trumpeting furiously at the top of his trumpet. "Stop that," said Billy and the troop horse together, and I could hear them stamp and shiver. An elephant's trumpeting is always nasty, especially on a dark night.
"I shan't stop," said Two Tails. "Won't you explain that, please?" "Rumph! Rudyard! Rumph! Rah!"
Then he stopped suddenly, and I heard a little whimper in the dark, and knew that Vixen had found me at last. She knew as well as I did that if there is one thing in the world the elephant is more afraid of than another, it is a little barking dog. So she stopped to bully Two Tails in his pickets, and yapped round his big feet. Two Tails shuffled and squeaked.
"Go away, little dog," he said. "Don't snuff at my ankles, or I'll kick at you." "Good little dog. Nice little doggy, then. Go home, you yelping little beast. Oh, why doesn't someone take her away? She'll bite me in a minute."
"Seems to me," said Billy to the troop horse, "that our friend Two Tails is afraid of most things. Now, if I had a full meal for every dog I've kicked across the parade ground, I should be as fat as Two Tails nearly." I whistled, and Vixen ran up to me, muddy all over, and licked my nose, and told me a long tale about hunting for me all through the camp. I never let her know that I understood beast talk, or she would have taken all sorts of liberties. So I buttoned her into the breast of my overcoat, and Two Tails shuffled and stamped and growled to himself.
"Extraordinary. Most extraordinary," he said. "It runs in our family. Now, where has that nasty little beast gone to?"
I heard him feeling about with his trunk.
"We all seem to be affected in various ways,"
he went on, blowing his nose.
"Now, you gentlemen were alarmed, I believe, when I trumpeted."
"Not alarmed, exactly," said the troop horse, "but it made me feel as though I had hornets where my saddle ought to be. Don't begin again."
"I'm frightened of a little dog, and the camel here is frightened by bad dreams in the night."
"It is very lucky for us that we haven't all got to fight in the same way," said the troop horse. "What I want to know," said the young mule, who had been quiet for a long time, "what I want to know is why we have to fight at all." "Because we are told to," said the troop horse, with a snort of contempt. "Orders," said Billy the mule, and his teeth snapped.
"Hook 'em high."
"It is an order," said the camel with a gurgle, and Two Tails and the bullocks repeated, "Hook 'em high." "Yes, but who gives the orders?" said the recruit mule. "The man who walks at your head, or sits on your back, or holds the nose rope, or twists your tail," said Billy and the troop horse and the camel and the bullocks, one after the other. "But who gives them the orders?" "Now you want to know too much, young'un," said Billy, "and that is one way of getting kicked. All you have to do is obey the man at your head and ask no questions."
"He's quite right," said Two Tails. "I can't always obey, because I'm betwixt and between. But Billy's right. Obey the man next to you who gives the order, or you'll stop all the battery, besides getting a thrashing."
The gun bullocks got up to go. "Morning is coming," they said. "We will go back to our lines. It is true that we see only out of our eyes, and we are not very clever, but still, we are the only people tonight who have not been afraid. Good night, you brave people." Nobody answered, and the troop horse said, to change the conversation, "Where's that little dog? A dog means a man somewhere near." "Here I am," yapped Vixen, "under the gun-tail with my man. You big blundering beast of a camel, you! You upset our tent. My man's very angry."
"You,"
said the bullocks. "He must be white." "Of course he is," said Vixen. "Do you suppose I'm looked after by a black bullock driver?"
"Wah! Wach! Ugh!" said the bullocks. "Let us get away quickly."
They plunged forward in the mud, and managed somehow to run their yoke on the pole of an ammunition wagon, where it jammed. "Now you have done it," said Billy calmly. "Don't struggle. You're hung up till daylight. What on earth's the matter?" The bullocks went off into the long hissing snorts that Indian cattle give, and pushed and crowded and slewed and stamped and slipped, and nearly fell down in the mud, grunting savagely. "You'll break your necks in a minute," said the troop horse. "What's the matter with white men? I live with them." "They eat us." "Pull!" said the near bullock. The yoke snapped with a twang, and they lumbered off together. I never knew before what made Indian cattle so afraid of Englishmen. We eat beef, a thing that no cattle driver touches, and of course the cattle do not like it. May I be flogged with my own pad chains. Who'd have thought of two big lumps like those losing their heads? Said Billy. Never mind. I'm going to look at this man. Most of the white men I know have things in their pockets, said the troop horse. I'll leave you then. I can't say I'm over fond of 'em myself. Besides, white men who haven't a place to sleep in are more than likely to be thieves, and I've a good deal of government property on my back. Come along, young'un, and we'll go back to our lines. Good night, Australia. See you on parade tomorrow, I suppose. Good night, old hay bale. Try to control your feelings, won't you? Good night, Two Tails. If you pass us on the ground tomorrow, don't trumpet. It spoils our formation. Billy the mule stumped off with the swaggering limp of an old campaigner, as the troop horse's head came nuzzling into my breast, and I gave him biscuits, while Vixen, who is a most conceited little dog, told him fibs about the scores of horses that she and I kept. I'm coming to the parade tomorrow in my dog-cart, she said. Where will you be? On the left hand of the second squadron. I set the time for all my troop, little lady, he said politely. Now I must go back to Dick. My tail's all muddy, and he'll have 2 hours' hard work dressing me for the parade. The big parade of all the 30,000 men was held that afternoon, and Vixen and I had a good place close to the Viceroy and the Amir of Afghanistan, with his high, big black hat of Astrakhan wool, and the great diamond star in the centre. The first part of the review was all sunshine, and the regiments went by in wave upon wave of legs all moving together, and guns all in a line, till our eyes grew dizzy. Then the cavalry came up, to the beautiful cavalry canter of Bonnie Dundee, and Vixen cocked her ear where she sat on the dog-cart. The second squadron of the Lancers shot by, and there was the troop horse, with his tail like spun silk, his head pulled into his breast, one ear forward and one back, setting the time for all his squadron, his legs going as smoothly as waltz music. Then the big guns came by, and I saw Two Tails and 2 other elephants harnessed in line to a 40-pounder siege gun, while 20 yoke of oxen walked behind. The 7th bear had a new yoke, and they looked rather stiff and tired. Last came the screw guns, and Billy the mule carried himself as though he commanded all the troops, and his harness was oiled and polished till it winked. I gave a cheer all by myself for Billy the mule, but he never looked right or left. The rain began to fall again, and for a while it was too misty to see what the troops were doing. They had made a big half-circle across the plain, and were spreading out into a line. That line grew and grew and grew, till it was 3/4 of a mile long from wing to wing, one solid wall of men, horses, and guns. Then it came on straight toward the Viceroy and the Amir, and as it got nearer the ground began to shake, like the deck of a steamer when the engines are going fast. Unless you have been there, you cannot imagine what a frightening effect this steady come-down of troops has on the spectators, even when they know it is only a review. I looked at the Amir. Up till then he had not shown the shadow of a sign of astonishment or anything else. But now his eyes began to get bigger and bigger, and he picked up the reins on his horse's neck and looked behind him. For a minute it seemed as though he were going to draw his sword and slash his way out through the English men and women in the carriages at the back. Then the advance stopped dead. The ground stood still. The whole line saluted, and 30 bands began to play all together. That was the end of the review, and the regiments went off to their camps in the rain, and an infantry band struck up with "The animals went in 2 by 2, hurrah! The animals went in 2 by 2, the elephant and the battery mule, and they all got into the ark, for to get out of the rain." Then I heard an old, grizzled, long-haired Central Asian chief, who had come down with the Amir, asking questions of a native officer. "Now," said he, "in what manner was this wonderful thing done?" And the officer answered, "There was an order, and they obeyed." "But are the beasts as wise as the men?" said the chief. "They obey as the men do. Mule, horse, elephant, or bullock, he obeys his driver, and the driver his sergeant, and the sergeant his lieutenant, and the lieutenant his captain, and the captain his major, and the major his colonel, and the colonel his brigadier commanding 3 regiments, and the brigadier his general, who obeys the viceroy, who is the servant of the empress. Thus it is done."
"Would it was so in Afghanistan," said the chief, "for there we obey only our own wills."
"And for that reason," said the native officer, twirling his moustache, "your Amir, whom you do not obey, must come here and take orders from our viceroy." Parade Song of the Camp Animals. Elephants of the Gun Team. We lent to Alexander the strength of Hercules, the wisdom of our foreheads, the cunning of our knees. We bowed our necks to service, they ne'er were loosed again. Make way their way for the 10-foot teams of the 40-pounder train. Gun bullocks. Those heroes in their harnesses avoid a cannonball, and what they know of powder upsets them one and all. When we come into action and tug the guns again, make way their way for the 20 yoke of the 40-pounder train. Cavalry horses. By the brand on my withers, the finest of tunes is played by the lancers, hussars, and dragoons, and it's sweeter than stables or water to me, the cavalry canter of bonny Dundee. Then feed us and break us and handle and groom, and give us good riders and plenty of room, and launch us in column of squadrons and see the way of the war-horse to bonny Dundee. Screw-gun mules. As me and my companions were scrambling up a hill, the path was lost in rolling stones, but we went forward still. For we can wriggle and climb, my lads, and turn up everywhere, and it's our delight on a mountain height with a leg or two to spare. Good luck to every sergeant then that lets us pick our road. Bad luck to all the driver-men that cannot pack a load. For we can wriggle and climb, my lads, and turn up everywhere, and it's our delight on a mountain height with a leg or two to spare. Commissariat camels. We haven't a camelty tune of our own to help us trollop along, but every neck is a hairy trombone, rit-a-ta-ta is a hairy trombone, and this is our marching song. Can't, don't, shan't, won't, pass it along the line. Somebody's pack has slid from his back, wish it were only mine. Somebody's load has tipped off in the road, cheer for a halt and a row.
Yar, grr, ar.
Somebody's catching it now. All the beasts together. Children of the camp are we, serving each in his degree, children of the yoke and goad, pack and harness, pad and load. See our line across the plain, like a heel rope bent again, reaching, writhing, rolling far, sweeping all away to war. While the men that walk beside, dusty, silent, heavy-eyed, cannot tell why we or they march and suffer day by day. Children of the camp are we, serving each in his degree, children of the yoke and goad, pack and harness, pad and load. The Second Jungle Book. Now these are the laws of the jungle, and many and mighty are they, but the head and the hoof of the law, and the haunch and the hump is obey. The stream is shrunk, the pool is dry, and we be comrades, thou and I, with fevered jowl and sunken flank, each jostling each along the bank, and, by one drowsy fear made still, foregoing thought of quest or kill. Now neath his dam the fawn may see the lean pack-wolf as cowed as he, and the tall buck unflinching note the fangs that tore his father's throat. The pools are shrunk, the streams are dry, and we be playmates, thou and I, till yonder cloud, good hunting, loose the rain that breaks the water truce. How fear came. The law of the jungle, which is by far the oldest law in the world, has arranged for almost every kind of accident that may befall the jungle people. Till now its code is as perfect as time and custom can make it. If you have read the other book about Mowgli, you will remember that he spent a great part of his life in the Seeonee wolf pack learning the law from Baloo the brown bear, and it was Baloo who told him, when the boy grew impatient at the constant orders, that the law was like the giant creeper, because it dropped across everyone's back and no one could escape.
When thou hast lived as long as I have, little brother, Thou wilt see how all the jungle obeys at least one law, and that will be no pleasant sight," said Baloo.
This talk went in at one ear and out at the other, for a boy who spends his life eating and sleeping does not worry about anything till it actually stares him in the face. But one year Baloo's words came true, and Mowgli saw all the jungle working under the law. It began when the winter rains failed almost entirely, and Ikki the porcupine, meeting Mowgli in a bamboo thicket, told him that the wild yams were drying up. Now everybody knows that Ikki is ridiculously fastidious in his choice of food, and will eat nothing but the very best and ripest. So Mowgli laughed and said, "What is that to me?" "Not much now," said Ikki, rattling his quills in a stiff, uncomfortable way. "But later we shall see. Is there any more diving into the deep rock pool below the bee rocks, little brother?" "No. The foolish water is going all away, and I do not wish to break my head," said Mowgli, who in those days was quite sure that he knew as much as any 5 of the jungle people put together. "That is thy loss. A small crack might let in some wisdom." Ikki ducked quickly to prevent Mowgli from pulling his nose bristles, and Mowgli told Baloo what Ikki had said. Baloo looked very grave and mumbled half to himself,
"If I were alone, I would change my hunting grounds now, before the others began to think. And yet, hunting among strangers ends in fighting, and they might hurt the man cub. We must wait and see how the mowa blooms."
That spring the mowa tree that Baloo was so fond of never flowered. The greeny, cream-coloured, waxy blossoms were heat-killed before they were born, and only a few bad-smelling petals came down when he stood on his hind legs and shook the tree. Then, inch by inch, the untempered heat crept into the heart of the jungle, turning it yellow, brown, and at last black. The green growths in the sides of the ravines burned up to broken wires and curled films of dead stuff. The hidden pools sank down and caked over, keeping the last, least footmark on their edges as if it had been cast in iron. The juicy-stemmed creepers fell away from the trees they clung to and died at their feet. The bamboos withered, clanking when the hot winds blew, and the moss peeled off the rocks deep in the jungle till they were as bare and as hot as the quivering blue boulders in the bed of the stream. The birds and the monkey people went north early in the year, for they knew what was coming, and the deer and the wild pig broke far away to the perished fields of the villages, dying sometimes before the eyes of men too weak to kill them. Chil the kite stayed and grew fat, for there was a great deal of carrion, and evening after evening he brought the news to the beasts, too weak to force their way to fresh hunting grounds, that the sun was killing the jungle for 3 days' flight in every direction. Mowgli, who had never known what real hunger meant, fell back on stale honey 3 years old, scraped out of deserted rock hives, honey black as a sloe and dusty with dried sugar. He hunted, too, for deep-boring grubs under the bark of the trees, and robbed the wasps of their new broods. All the game in the jungle was no more than skin and bone, and Bagheera could kill thrice in a night and hardly get a full meal. But the want of water was the worst, for though the jungle people drink seldom, they must drink deep. And the heat went on, and sucked up all the moisture, till at last the main channel of the Waingunga was the only stream that carried a trickle of water between its dead banks. And when Hathi, the wild elephant, who lives for 100 years and more, saw a long, lean blue ridge of rock show dry in the very centre of the stream, he knew that he was looking at the Peace Rock. And then and there he lifted up his trunk and proclaimed the water truce, as his father before him had proclaimed it 50 years ago. The deer, wild pig, and buffalo took up the cry hoarsely, and Chil the kite flew in great circles far and wide, whistling and shrieking the warning. By the law of the jungle, it is death to kill at the drinking places when once the water truce has been declared. The reason of this is that drinking comes before eating. Everyone in the jungle can scramble along somehow when only game is scarce. But water is water, and when there is but one source of supply, all hunting stops while the jungle people go there for their needs. In good seasons, when water was plentiful, those who came down to drink at the Waingunga, or anywhere else for that matter, did so at the risk of their lives, and that risk made no small part of the fascination of the night's doings. To move down so cunningly that never a leaf stirred, to wade knee-deep in the roaring shallows that drown all noise from behind, to drink, looking backward over one shoulder, every muscle ready for the first desperate bound of keen terror. To roll on the sandy margin and return wet-muzzled and well-plumped out to the admiring herd was a thing that all tall-antlered young bucks took a delight in, precisely because they knew that at any moment Bagheera or Shere Khan might leap upon them and bear them down. But now all that life-and-death fun was ended, and the jungle people came up, starved and weary, to the shrunken river, tiger, bear, deer, buffalo, and pig all together, drank the fouled waters, and hung above them, too exhausted to move off. The deer and the pig had tramped all day in search of something better than dried bark and withered leaves. The buffaloes had found no wallows to be cool in, and no green crops to steal. The snakes had left the jungle and come down to the river in the hope of finding a stray frog. They curled round wet stones, and never offered to strike when the nose of a rooting pig dislodged them. The river turtles had long ago been killed by Bagheera, cleverest of hunters, and the fish had buried themselves deep in the dry mud. Only the Peace Rock lay across the shallows like a long snake, and the tired little ripples hissed as they dried on its hot side. It was here that Mowgli came nightly for the cool and the companionship. The most hungry of his enemies would hardly have cared for the boy then. His naked hide made him seem more lean and wretched than any of his fellows. His hair was bleached to tow-colour by the sun, his ribs stood out like the ribs of a basket, and the lumps on his knees and elbows, where he was used to track on all fours, gave his shrunken limbs the look of knotted grass stems. But his eye, under his matted forelock, was cool and quiet, for Bagheera was his adviser in this time of trouble, and told him to go quietly, hunt slowly, and never, on any account, to lose his temper. "It is an evil time," said the Black Panther, one furnace-hot evening, "but it will go if we can live till the end. Is thy stomach full, Man-cub?" "There is stuff in my stomach, but I get no good of it. Think you, Bagheera, the rains have forgotten us and will never come again?"
Not I. We shall see the Moa in blossom yet, and the little fawns all fat with new grass. Come down to the Peace Rock and hear the news. On my back, little brother."
"This is no time to carry weight. I can still stand alone. But indeed we be no fatted bullocks, we too." Bagheera looked along his ragged, dusty flank and whispered,
"Last night I killed a bullock under the yoke. So low was I brought that I think I should not have dared to spring if he had been loose." "Wow."
Mowgli laughed. "Yes, we be great hunters now," said he. "I am very bold, to eat grubs." And the two came down together through the crackling undergrowth to the river bank and the lacework of shoals that ran out from it in every direction.
"The water cannot live long," said Baloo, joining them. "Look across. Yonder are trails like the roads of man."
On the level plain of the further bank the stiff jungle grass had died standing, and, dying, had mummied. The beaten tracks of the deer and the pig, all heading toward the river, had striped that colourless plain with dusty gullies driven through the 10-foot grass, and, early as it was, each long avenue was full of first-comers hastening to the water. You could hear the does and fawns coughing in the snuff-like dust. Upstream, at the bend of the sluggish pool round the Peace Rock and warden of the water truce, stood Hathi, the wild elephant, with his sons gaunt and grey in the moonlight, rocking to and fro, always rocking. Below him a little were the vanguard of the deer, below these again the pig and the wild buffalo, and on the opposite bank, where the tall trees came down to the water's edge, was the place set apart for the eaters of flesh, the tigers, the wolves, the panther and the bear, and the others.
"We are under one law indeed," said Bagheera, wading into the water and looking across at the lines of clicking horns and staring eyes where the deer and the pig pushed each other to and fro. "Good hunting, all of you of my blood," he added, lying down at full length, one flank thrust out of the shallows, and then between his teeth, "But for that which is the law, it would be very good hunting."
The quick spread ears of the deer caught the last sentence, and a frightened whisper ran along the ranks. "The truce! Remember the truce!"
"Peace there, peace," gurgled Hathi the wild elephant. "The truce holds, Bagheera. This is no time to talk of hunting."
"Who should know better than I?" Bagheera answered, rolling his yellow eyes upstream. "I am an eater of turtles, a fisher of frogs."
"Nyah! Would I could get good from chewing branches."
"We wish so very greatly," bleated a young fawn, who had only been born that spring and did not at all like it. Wretched as the jungle people were, even Hathi could not help chuckling, while Mowgli, lying on his elbows in the warm water, laughed aloud and beat up the scum with his feet. "Well spoken, little Budhorn," Bagheera purred. "When the truce ends, that shall be remembered in thy favour." And he looked keenly through the darkness to make sure of recognizing the fawn again. Gradually the talking spread up and down the drinking places. One could hear the scuffling, snorting pig asking for more room, the buffaloes grunting among themselves as they lurched out across the sandbars, and the deer telling pitiful stories of their long, footsore wanderings in quest of food. Now and again they asked some question of the eaters of flesh across the river, but all the news was bad, and the roaring hot wind of the jungle came and went between the rocks and the rattling branches, and scattered twigs and dust on the water. "The menfolk, too, they die beside their ploughs," said a young Sambur. "I passed 3 between sunset and night. They lay still, and their bullocks with them. We also shall lie still in a little."
"The river has fallen since last night," said Baloo. "Oh, Hathi, hast thou ever seen the like of this drought?"
"It will pass. It will pass," said Hathi, squirting water along his back and sides.
"We have one here that cannot endure long," said Baloo, and he looked toward the boy he loved.
"I?" said Mowgli indignantly, sitting up in the water. "I have no long fur to cover my bones, but if thy hide were taken off, Baloo—" Hathi shook all over at the idea, and Baloo said severely,
"A man cub, that is not seemly to tell a teacher of the law. Never have I been seen without my hide."
"Nay, I meant no harm, Baloo, but only that thou art, as it were, like the coconut in the husk, and I am the same coconut all naked. Now that brown husk of thine—" Mowgli was sitting cross-legged and explaining things with his forefinger in his usual way, when Bagheera put out a paddy paw and pulled him over backward into the water. "Worse and worse," said the Black Panther, as the boy rose spluttering. "First Baloo is to be skinned, and now he is a coconut. Be careful that he does not do what the ripe coconuts do." "And what is that?" said Mowgli, off his guard for the minute, though that is one of the oldest catches in the jungle. "Break thy head," said Bagheera quietly, pulling him under again.
"It is not good to make a jest of thy teacher," said the bear, when Mowgli had been ducked for the 3rd time.
"Not good.
What would ye have? That naked thing running to and fro makes a monkey jest of those who have once been good hunters, and pulls the best of us by the whisker for sport."
This was Shere Khan, the lame tiger, limping down to the water. He waited a little to enjoy the sensation he made among the deer on the opposite bank. Then he dropped his square, frilled head and began to lap, growling.
"The jungle has become a whelping ground for naked cubs now. Look at me, man cub."
Mowgli looked, stared rather, as insolently as he knew how, and in a minute Shere Khan turned away uneasily.
"Man cub this and man cub that,"
he rumbled, going on with his drink.
"The cub is neither man nor cub, or he would have been afraid. Next season I shall have to beg his leave for a drink. Rawr!"
"That may come too," said Bagheera, looking him steadily between the eyes. "That may come too. For, Shere Khan, what new shame hast thou brought here?" The lame tiger had dipped his chin and jowl in the water, and dark, oily streaks were floating from it downstream.
"Man,"
said Shere Khan coolly. "I killed an hour since." He went on purring and growling to himself. The line of beasts shook and wavered to and fro, and a whisper went up that grew to a cry. "Man! Man! He has killed man!" Then all looked toward Hathi, the wild elephant, but he seemed not to hear. Hathi never does anything till the time comes, and that is one of the reasons why he lives so long. At such a season as this, to kill man, was no other game afoot? Said Bagheera scornfully, drawing himself out of the tainted water and shaking each paw cat-fashion as he did so. I killed for choice, not for food. The horrified whisper began again, and Hathi's watchful little white eye cocked itself in Shere Khan's direction. For choice, Shere Khan drawled. Now I come to drink and make me clean again. Is there any to forbid? Bagheera's back began to curve like a bamboo in a high wind, but Hathi lifted up his trunk and spoke quietly. Thy kill was from choice? He asked, and when Hathi asks a question, it is best to answer. Even so. It was my right and my night. Thou knowest, O Hathi. Shere Khan spoke almost courteously. Yes, I know, Hathi answered, and after a little silence, Hast thou drunk thy fill? For tonight, yes. Go then. The river is to drink and not to defile. None but the lame tiger would so have boasted of his right at this season when we suffer together, man and jungle people alike. Clean or unclean, get to thy lair, Shere Khan. The last words rang out like silver trumpets, and Hathi's 3 sons rolled forward half a pace, though there was no need. Shere Khan slunk away, not daring to growl, for he knew, what everyone else knew, that when the last comes to the last, Hathi is the master of the jungle. What is this right Shere Khan speaks of? Mowgli whispered in Bagheera's ear. To kill man is always shameful. The law says so, and yet Hathi says, Ask him. I do not know, little brother. Right or no right, if Hathi had not spoken, I would have taught that lame butcher his lesson. To come to the Peace Rock fresh from a kill of man, and to boast of it, is a jackal's trick. Besides, he tainted the good water. Mowgli waited for a minute to pick up his courage, because no one cared to address Hathi directly, and then he cried, What is Shere Khan's right, O Hathi? Both banks echoed his words, for all the people of the jungle are intensely curious, and they had just seen something that none, except Baloo, who looked very thoughtful, seemed to understand. It is an old tale, said Hathi, a tale older than the jungle. Keep silence along the banks, and I will tell that tale. There was a minute or two of pushing and shouldering among the pigs and the buffalo, and then the leaders of the herds grunted, one after another, We wait. And Hathi strode forward till he was nearly knee-deep in the pool by the Peace Rock. Lean and wrinkled and yellow-tusked though he was, he looked what the jungle knew him to be, their master. Ye know, children, he began, that of all things ye most fear man. And there was a mutter of agreement. This tale touches thee, little brother, said Bagheera to Mowgli. I am of the pack, a hunter of the free people, Mowgli answered. What have I to do with man? And ye do not know why ye fear man? Hathi went on. This is the reason. In the beginning of the jungle, and none know when that was, we of the jungle walked together, having no fear of one another. In those days there was no drought, and leaves and flowers and fruit grew on the same tree, and we ate nothing at all except leaves and flowers and grass and fruit and bark. I am glad I was not born in those days, said Bagheera. Bark is only good to sharpen claws. And the lord of the jungle was Tha, the first of the elephants. He drew the jungle out of deep waters with his trunk, and where he made furrows in the ground with his tusks, there the rivers ran, and where he struck with his foot, there rose ponds of good water, and when he blew through his trunk, thus the trees fell. That was the manner in which the jungle was made by Tha, and so the tale was told to me. It has not lost fat in the telling, Bagheera whispered, and Mowgli laughed behind his hand. In those days there was no corn, or melons, or pepper, or sugar-cane, nor were there any little huts such as ye have all seen, and the jungle people knew nothing of man, but lived in the jungle together, making one people.
But presently they began to dispute over their food, though there was grazing enough for all. They were lazy. Each wished to eat where he lay down, as sometimes we can do now when the spring rains are good. Thar, the first of the elephants, was busy making new jungles and leading the rivers in their beds. He could not walk in all places, therefore he made the first of the tigers the master and the judge of the jungle, to whom the jungle people should bring their disputes. In those days the first of the tigers ate fruit and grass with the others. He was as large as I am, and he was very beautiful, in colour all over like the blossom of the yellow creeper. There was never stripe nor bar upon his hide in those good days when this jungle was new. All the jungle people came before him without fear, and his word was the law of all the jungle. We were then, remember ye, one people. Yet upon a night there was a dispute between two bucks, a grazing quarrel, such as ye now settle with the horns and the forefeet. And it is said that as the two spoke together before the first of the tigers, lying among the flowers, a buck pushed him with his horns, and the first of the tigers forgot that he was the master and judge of the jungle, and leaping upon that buck, broke his neck. Till that night, never one of us had died, and the first of the tigers, seeing what he had done, and being made foolish by the scent of the blood, ran away into the marshes of the north, and we of the jungle, left without a judge, fell to fighting among ourselves. And Tsar heard the noise of it, and came back. Then some of us said this, and some of us said that, but he saw the dead buck among the flowers, and asked who had killed. And we of the jungle would not tell, because the smell of the blood made us foolish. We ran to and fro in circles, capering and crying out and shaking our heads. Then Tsar gave an order to the trees that hang low, and to the trailing creepers of the jungle, that they should mark the killer of the buck, so that he should know him again. And he said, "Who will now be master of the jungle people?" Then up leaped the grey ape, who lives in the branches, and said, "I will now be master of the jungle." At this Tsar laughed and said, "So be it," and went away very angry. Children, ye know the grey ape. He was then as he is now. At the first he made a wise face for himself, but in a little while he began to scratch and to leap up and down, and when Tsar came back he found the grey ape hanging head down from a bough, mocking those who stood below, and they mocked him again. And so there was no law in the jungle, only foolish talk and senseless words. Then Tsar called us all together and said, "The first of your masters has brought death into the jungle, and the second shame. Now it is time there was a law, and a law that ye must not break. Now ye shall know fear, and when ye have found him ye shall know that he is your master, and the rest shall follow." Then we of the jungle said, "What is fear?" And Tsar said, "Seek till ye find." So we went up and down the jungle seeking for fear, and presently the buffaloes— "Ugh," said Miser, the leader of the buffaloes, from their sandbank. Yes, Miser, it was the buffaloes. They came back with the news that in a cave in the jungle sat Fear, and that he had no hair and went upon his hind legs. Then we of the jungle followed the herd till we came to that cave, and Fear stood at the mouth of it, and he was, as the buffaloes had said, hairless, and he walked upon his hinder legs. When he saw us he cried out, and his voice filled us with the fear that we have now of that voice when we hear it, and we ran away, tramping upon and tearing each other because we were afraid. That night, so it was told to me, we of the jungle did not lie down together as used to be our custom, but each tribe drew off by itself, the pig with the pig, the deer with the deer, horn to horn, hoof to hoof, like keeping to like, and so lay shaking in the jungle. Only the first of the tigers was not with us, for he was still hidden in the marshes of the north. And when word was brought to him of the thing we had seen in the cave, he said, "I will go to this thing and break his neck." So he ran all the night till he came to the cave. But the trees and the creepers on his path, remembering the order that Thar had given, let down their branches and marked him as he ran, drawing their fingers across his back, his flank, his forehead, and his jowl. Wherever they touched him there was a mark and a stripe upon his yellow hide.
and those stripes do his children wear to this day. When he came to the cave, Fear, the hairless one, put out his hand and called him the striped one that comes by night. And the first of the tigers was afraid of the hairless one, and ran back to the swamps, howling. Mowgli chuckled quietly here, his chin in the water. So loud did he howl that Tha heard him and said, "What is the sorrow?" And the first of the tigers, lifting up his muzzle to the new-made sky, which is now so old, said, "Give me back my power, O Tha. I am made ashamed before all the jungle, and I have run away from a hairless one, and he has called me a shameful name." "And why?" said Tha. "Because I am smeared with the mud of the marshes," said the first of the tigers. "Swim then, and roll on the wet grass, and if it be mud it will wash away," said Tha. And the first of the tigers swam and rolled upon the grass, till the jungle ran round and round before his eyes, but not one little bar upon all his hide was changed. And Tha, watching him, laughed. Then the first of the tigers said, "What have I done that this comes to me?" Tha said, "Thou hast killed the buck, and thou hast let death loose in the jungle, and with death has come fear, so that the people of the jungle are afraid one of the other, as thou art afraid of the hairless one." The first of the tigers said, "They will never fear me, for I knew them since the beginning." Tha said, "Go and see." And the first of the tigers ran to and fro, calling aloud to the deer and the pig and the sambor and the porcupine, and all the jungle peoples. And they all ran away from him who had been their judge, because they were afraid. Then the first of the tigers came back, and his pride was broken in him, and, beating his head upon the ground, he tore up the earth with all his feet, and said, "Remember that I was once the master of the jungle. Do not forget me, O Tha. Let my children remember that I was once without shame or fear." And Tha said, "This much I will do, because thou and I together saw the jungle made. For one night in each year it shall be as it was before the buck was killed, for thee and for thy children. In that one night, if ye meet the hairless one, and his name is Man, ye shall not be afraid of him, but he shall be afraid of you, as though ye were judges of the jungle and masters of all things. Show him mercy in that night of his fear, for thou hast known what fear is." Then the first of the tigers answered, "I am content." But when next he drank, he saw the black stripes upon his flank and his side, and he remembered the name that the hairless one had given him, and he was angry. For a year he lived in the marshes, waiting till Tha should keep his promise. And upon a night when the jackal of the moon, the evening star, stood clear of the jungle, he felt that his night was upon him, and he went to that cave to meet the hairless one. Then it happened as Tha promised, for the hairless one fell down before him and lay along the ground, and the first of the tigers struck him and broke his back, for he thought that there was but one such thing in the jungle, and that he had killed Fear. Then, nosing above the kill, he heard Tha coming down from the woods of the north, and presently the voice of the first of the elephants, which is the voice that we hear now. The thunder was rolling up and down the dry, scarred hills, but it brought no rain, only heat lightning that flickered along the ridges. And Hathi went on, "That was the voice he heard, and it said, 'Is this thy mercy?'" The first of the tigers licked his lips and said, "What matter? I have killed Fear." And Tha said, "O blind and foolish! Thou hast untied the feet of death, and he will follow thy trail till thou diest. Thou hast taught man to kill." The first of the tigers, standing stiffly to his kill, said, "He is as the buck was. There is no fear. Now I will judge the jungle peoples once more." And Tha said, "Never again shall the jungle peoples come to thee. They shall never cross thy trail, nor sleep near thee, nor follow after thee, nor browse by thy lair. Only Fear shall follow thee, and with a blow that thou canst not see he shall bid thee wait his pleasure. He shall make the ground to open under thy feet, and the creeper to twist about thy neck, and the tree trunks to grow together about thee higher than thou canst leap. And at the last he shall take thy hide to wrap his cubs when they are cold. Thou hast shown him no mercy, and none will he show thee." The first of the tigers was very bold, for his knight was still on him, and he said, "The promise of Thar is the promise of Thar. He will not take away my knight." And Thar said, "The one knight is thine, as I have said, but there is a price to pay. Thou hast taught man to kill, and he is no slow learner." The first of the tigers said, "He is here under my foot, and his back is broken. Let the jungle know I have killed Fear." Then Thar laughed and said, "Thou hast killed one of many, but thou thyself shalt tell the jungle, for thy night is ended." So the day came, and from the mouth of the cave went out another hairless one, and he saw the kill in the path, and the first of the tigers above it, and he took a pointed stick. "They throw a thing that cuts now," said Ikki, rustling down the bank. For Ikki was considered uncommonly good eating by the Gonds. They called him Ho Igu, and he knew something of the wicked little Gondi axe that whirls across a clearing like a dragonfly. "It was a pointed stick, such as they put in the foot of a pit trap," said Hathi, and throwing it, he struck the first of the tigers deep in the flank. Thus it happened as Thar said, for the first of the tigers ran howling up and down the jungle till he tore out the stick, and all the jungle knew that the hairless one could strike from far off, and they feared more than before. So it came about that the first of the tigers taught the hairless one to kill, and ye know what harm that has since done to all our peoples, through the noose, and the pitfall, and the hidden trap, and the flying stick, and the stinging fly that comes out of white smoke. Hathi meant the rifle, and the red flower that drives us into the open. Yet for one night in the year the hairless one fears the tiger as Thar promised, and never has the tiger given him cause to be less afraid. Where he finds him, there he kills him, remembering how the first of the tigers was made ashamed. For the rest, Fear walks up and down the jungle by day and by night. "Aye, ow," said the deer, thinking of what it all meant to them. "And only when there is one great fear over all, as there is now, can we of the jungle lay aside our little fears and meet together in one place as we do now." "For one night only does man fear the tiger?" said Mowgli. "For one night only," said Hathi. But all the jungle knows that Shere Khan kills man twice and thrice in a moon." "Even so. Then he springs from behind and turns his head aside as he strikes, for he is full of fear. If man looked at him he would run. But on his one night he goes openly down to the village. He walks between the houses and thrusts his head into the doorway, and the men fall on their faces, and there he does his kill. One kill in that night." "Oh," said Mowgli to himself, rolling over in the water. "Now I see why it was Shere Khan bade me look at him. He got no good of it, for he could not hold his eyes steady, and I certainly did not fall down at his feet. But then I am not a man, being of the Free People." Said Bagheera, deep in his furry throat. "Does the tiger know his night?" "Never till the jackal of the moon stands clear of the evening mist. Sometimes it falls in the dry summer, and sometimes in the wet rains, this one night of the tiger. But for the first of the tigers this would never have been, nor would any of us have known fear." The deer grunted sorrowfully, and Bagheera's lips curled in a wicked smile. "Do men know this tale?" said he. "None know it except the tigers, and we, the elephants, the children of Thar. Now ye by the pools have heard it, and I have spoken.